So you did deploy in 2009 with the Striker Brigade for 3 months, unfortunately, like you said.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that deployment.
It was exactly what I was expecting. That saying, be careful what you wish for. I'm a very firm believer in it because, I was outside the wire doing patrols probably every other day in our strikers. And, it was like clockwork for 3 months. And then, on this particular day, September 13th, 2009, we had a different mission. It was to go pay for damages that were done the previous night to a farmer's irrigation ditch. And
oh man,
yeah, so it was kind of one of those things where it just kind of threw everything out of whack, I guess. And I was my platoon sergeant's driver at the time, and the rear vehicle just kind of driving along like usual in our convoy, and we were joking over our CVs, and the next thing I know, everything goes black like I hit a brick wall. And unfortunately, I hit a improvised IED. I was, driving either too far to the left or too far to the right of the tracks in front of me, and the blast went off underneath me. And it was kind of one of those things where I'm very glad I remember everything. Just because, in a sick kind of way, I think it was an awesome experience, and I say that only because I was the only person to get wounded.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I was very lucky. When I got back to the States, I didn't think I was, but in retrospect, I look back at everything that has happened, and it's opened so many doors for me. But this particular day just took me out of the fight. I had a concussion. My right eardrum was blown, a couple vertebrae fractures, a minor pelvic fracture. Both femurs were fractured.
Oh man.
And my lower right leg was, when I started to come to, I was choking on dirt, dust. Everything was hazy. And I just kind of was giving myself the overall check, and I didn't see anything below my right knee. So I kind of wrote it off as my lower right leg was gone. But what had happened was the blast that went off underneath me forced that armor plate underneath the striker to push up into my legs. And somehow my right leg got snaked into the engine compartment directly to the right. And
oh wow.
Yeah, so that's why I didn't see anything below my knee, because it was just kind of hidden in the engine compartment. And
so you came to in the Humvee?
I did, yeah, in the Striker.
Or in the Striker.
Yeah, it's I think back to like hearing stories and knowing some people that after a blast goes off, they're like able to function and do all this stuff. But at that time for me, I was just so I wasn't able to function really. I couldn't put on my own tourniquet or anything. I was just in so much not pain, but so much shock, I guess, that of what was going on, that I couldn't really function. I just remember
a lot of physical injuries too.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not running anywhere or doing anything. So no matter how I look at it, it's not going to happen that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's an experience that I'm so glad I remember, because it's so humbling to me now. I just remember everyone, my medic, my platoon sergeant, the dismounts didn't even skip a beat. They got me on a litter and were calling up the 9 line within 10 minutes probably. And, there's so much adrenaline going through your body that you don't really feel the pain. And the best way I try to describe that feeling is just imagine your entire lower half of your body being squeezed by a vice. There's just so much pressure that, and it's weird to say, it didn't even hurt. Like, I didn't cry at all. It just was a huge amount of pressure. Like, your body was being squeezed, I guess. And
I think that's an incredible statement that you said, that you're happy to be able to have remembered, because it humbles you.
Yeah, it does. It took years for me to come to that state of mind, because when it first happened, I was very upset at the world for no particular reason. Just felt sorry for myself, and had things happen since then that really completely gave my mindset a 180 degrees from where it was. But
how did that come about? Like, what was your recovery like? Like, how did you go from point A to point B?
Took me 5 days to get back in the States. I ended up getting medevac to Kandahar Airfield where I had emergency surgeries done. And that was probably
Did you end up on shoes shoes
no.
table?
So that happened.
Okay. Okay.
That actually happened in San Antonio when I got back stateside. But
Oh, so it eventually happened.
yes,
Wow.
yes,
That's incredible.
yeah.
That's incredible.
I'm telling you, all these little things that have happened in my life makes me believe I'm here for a reason. So I just have to keep
Absolutely.
plugging that, because we're all entitled to bad days. We just don't want to drag it out. So you got to remember all the good things. Being completely terrified when I was getting rolled into the emergency room in Kandahar. There's just that feeling you're so vulnerable and you're half naked for your own good and you're in pain. And, just seeing these people line up wanting to help you was in a way terrifying. But what really terrified me was knowing that I was ending up on the operating room table. And I know what can happen on that table. So it was one of the.
You saw it.
Yeah, I saw it, and it was it's another very cliche thing to say, but it was one of those things where, as I was, getting put on the litter in the back of the Stryker, I was just wanted to keep my eyes open, because there's always that scene in war movies where if you close your eyes, you're not coming back from that, and that's kind of something that really stuck in my mind. So I was terrified, but I had emergency surgery done in Kandahar. I spent the night there. And that was the first time I saw my lower right leg was waking up from surgery after that. So it was pretty shocking to see.
Got to be a little bit of a relief. Like, oh, there it is.
Yeah, it was a relief, and because I had already written it off as gone, and
wow,
to see it was like, wow, I'm very lucky, not just because of that, but because I'm alive. And then, I got to call to my parents. I called them at home. They had already gotten a call from, the company commander that, I was wounded, but they didn't know much more than that. And when they finally got a call from me, it was very important for them to hear my voice, but to know that I was telling them that I was okay.
Gotcha.
I actually, there's another little funny story about that, because I'm originally from Wisconsin, big Green Bay Packer fan.
Oh, man.
And I remember asking them, because this is the year that Favre went to the Vikings. I'm like, is Brett Favre really a
Viking? and your drugged up stupor.
Oh yeah,
with your parents, probably full of all kinds of stuff to numb the pain.
Yeah.
Your thought was Brett Favre.
Yeah, football Brett Favre. I'm like, the story's true. He's really a Viking.
That's hilarious.
I got to spend probably no more than a day in Kandahar, and then I got flown to Bagram, where I'd spend another day. And there's kind of a ironic story about that, and I can't remember exactly if it's when I flew from Kandahar or when I flew from Bagram, but the transport plane we were on caught on fire.
Oh my God!
So yeah, there was a compartment fire on the plane, and we had to divert back. And it's kind of like, at this point, what else is going to happen?
No kidding. No kidding. So, but you eventually made it back to the States.
Yeah, I eventually did. Spent 2 days in Landstuhl, Germany, and then on the 18th, so 5 days exact after, I ended up back where my story kind of began, Brooke Army Medical Center. And I can't even imagine telling you, but the shock for Dr. Shu to see that Benjamin Breckheimer is on the OR table today. He's scheduled for surgery.
Wow.
It was just completely, I'm just so lucky, so blessed to have such amazing people in my life. I think, getting sent back to Brooke Army Medical Center was probably one of the best things to happen to me, because, there's people that I worked with in the operating room there, and I trusted them. I trusted him. And, unfortunately I spent 4 years there.
Oh my gosh.
But I still have my leg to this day.